Hey everyone, this is Dr. Andrew Dufresne. Welcome to Lake Erie TV. Lake Erie TV is dedicated to educating and entertaining the citizens who live, work, and visit the Lake Erie watershed. We engage with the most interesting thinkers, writers, politicians, entertainers, business leaders, scientists, and other newsmakers of the day through interviews and stories about how policy, history, education, and agriculture has shaped the people around Lake Erie. First, I want to thank Jaron Caldwell of the Huron Harbor House for allowing us to use the facility for this interview. Lake Erie TV sat down with City Manager of Huron, Matt Lakso, and Huron City Council Member Joel Hagy to discuss the status of Huron's 2020 Vision Plan and the future of Huron's economic development, among other topics. To provide you with some background, the City of Huron has had a long history of urban renewal, and for what it's worth, the feedback has been both negative and positive, depending upon who you ask. But before we look at the future, let's review the past urban development decisions in the 1960s that led up to the current urban renewal projects. In the 1960s, the city was granted $2.6 million federal dollars during an urban renewal project. The purpose was to remove blighted downtown buildings and develop new buildings in the city center that would reroute Main Street around a land expansion for a larger boat basin with a public boating facility, bars, restaurants, and mixed-use buildings for a new and improved business district. And all of that occurred. For the complete history, you can watch the documentary Downtown Interrupted, Huron's Urban Renewal Experience, available on Huron's Historical Society's YouTube channel. Since the urban renewal was completed, the city has invested in an improved Route 6 corridor for pedestrians and bicyclists and cool street lighting, among other improvements. And they are improvements, perhaps with the exception of razing of the Gull Motel, which I feel was a tragedy. It seems as that was the final act of the 1960s urban renewal plan. Well, anyway, more recently, the City of Huron put a few committees together in the late 2010s and created their Vision 2020 plan. You can find the plan on the City of Huron's website. The Vision 2020 plan created recommendations for important initiatives such as the Conagra redevelopment area, the downtown district, and something called the Gateway North. The consensus of the stakeholders was to redevelop the Conagra site first. This is where we began our interview. I asked City Manager Matt Lakso and Councilman Joel Hagy how the Vision 2020 plan was progressing. You will hear Councilman Hagy speaking first.
Yeah, so maybe I'll kick it off because there's a reality here, in my opinion, that we as council members, by and large, are simply oversight for the professionals like Matt and his staff to do what they do, and they're very good at it. And so we set a vision and we make sure that the staff is doing things according to the vision. But really, all the work and hard work is on the part of the staff. And I'll just give a bit of history with regard to the 2020 vision plan. We were, from an economic development standpoint, floundering a bit in my first year on council, which was 2 years ago, and that the Economic Development Committee would meet, and they were good meetings, and there was a lot of good things discussed, but we really were sort of for lack of a direction in where we wanted to go with the town, with the community. And thankfully, Matt came in with his staff and put some structure around it. So they were very good at leading us to where we are right now through a series of meetings and action workouts where we were able to do what we should be doing, which is creating a vision and then providing oversight. So, the real nuts and bolts of what's happening though and what gets done on a daily basis, I'm going to turn that over to you, Matt.
Yeah, appreciate it, Joel. I think there are a couple things we're trying to balance with the plan from a staff standpoint and a council standpoint. I think we both wanted to have goals and objectives that were realistic, but at the same time that push the envelope from a development standpoint, a program standpoint. Also, we wanted to set sort of a time horizon of 3 to 5 years so that we both would be able to put some pressure behind and momentum behind getting actual things done, but acknowledging that some of the projects that came out of the plan do take a lot of heavy lifting and do take multiple years. So we thought sort of the 3 to 5 year window made a lot of sense. A couple of the high-level things that came out of that plan in no particular order were the ultimate redevelopment of the ConAgra Peninsula, which is behind us. Secondarily, we wanted to investigate and replan and revision the entire Main Street corridor, really from the Lighthouse South to Bogart Road, where there's been some investment, but it feels a little disjointed as the main commercial corridor in the city of Huron. Also, we know that the city needs to take a little bit more aggressive hand, a more direct hand in spurring new housing development. I think what we've seen is we have a really strong housing market in Huron. We see increasing prices, we see lack of inventory, and we constantly hear that people are looking for housing here that is both conducive to people who are retiring, but also that are new families and young families that need something a little bit more affordable. And I do think we're missing the opportunity to attract new residents into the community because there's not new housing being built. Also, what came out of that plan is to utilize the city's utility services, which we really view as an economic development tool, specifically our water service and Huron Public Power. I don't know if a lot of people know that the city does operate a municipal power supplier, which right now supplies Moochie Farms and Huron Corporate Park. But we've traditionally found that Huron Public Power is about 20% cheaper than other people in the market. So we are looking for ways to expand those utilities throughout the community from an economic development standpoint. And then lastly, what I wanted to mention is with all that development that I just spoke of, we want to balance those things that have made Huron so great and that have resulted in people living here, staying here, building their families here. That really comes down to basic services, reinvestments in streets, tree canopy, code and zoning enforcement, sidewalks, accessibility. So we really wanted to balance that in the action plan. So those were really the 5 keys that came out of that plan. And I think we're happy to report that we're seeing movement. Let's start with ConAgra. We went through a pretty exhaustive process last summer that ultimately resulted in the selection of a developer out of Toledo, NAI Harmon Group, who we're currently in negotiations with, oversight control of the ConAgra property, and actually hope to have ground broken within the next 8 to 12 months. So we're continuing to move that stone uphill because it is a lot of work that's involved there. Actually, as it relates to the Main Street vision and planning process, actually on our next council agenda on March 22nd will be a proposal with a consultant to lead council, planning commission, but most importantly, the community and the stakeholders of Main Street through that visioning process, which we hope to complete this year so that we can look to 2023 to actually implement and finance and fund some of those improvements. From a housing standpoint, we're seeing great progress as well. ConAgra, which is going to be predominantly residential, but does have some nice commercial retail peppered in and great green space. That's going to bring on 80 new residential units. We've just recently met with the developers of the former Two Rivers development that are looking at bringing about 100 units online. So those are the initiatives that we're trying to be a little bit more proactive on. And then certainly, basic services. We are aggressively trying to put money in with council support into local street resurfacing. We're spending $500,000 in 2022, but between 2023 and 2025, we're looking to invest $7.5 million in our local streets. And add to that, we've got several applications in for funding to install new sidewalks to areas of the community where they don't exist. And with our planning and zoning department, we're going through processes to reinstitute our tree canopy commission to ensure that we've got a great tree canopy, so we're continuously removing dead and decaying trees, but also repopulating them with new trees. So, we've got an eye on all those things from the vision plan, and they've really created a great direction for staff with council's blessing.
Yeah, and I just want to tug on one thing, which is the expectation and the timing, because you made a comment about, these things take a long time. And it was one of the big realizations for me coming on the council is that big things take a long time because they cost a lot of money, and you either have to raise it or take a bond. But, you know, when big things happen in this town, like Route 6 was just redone, really spectacular job there. That was decided and funded and planned years before I was even on council, you know?
Yeah.
And so the kind of stuff Matt's talking about is, it's years and years out. And so that can be a little frustrating if you're kind of like me and you want stuff to happen right away. It just doesn't work that way. And so, you know, I just wanted to pull on that a little bit, you know, and set the expectation. You're not going to be seeing houses on the ConAgra site next month. And,
Yeah.
But all these things are not only necessary and wanted, you know, desired by the community, but also, I forgot what I was going to say.
Now that you have established a vision, how do you get buy-in from the community and business leaders? And how are you accomplishing this?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I remembered what I forgot. Integrated, because that's really important, because there are a lot of people that have a lot of great ideas, and I mean that, I'm not being facetious, for the town, but we have to make sure it fits into that plan that Matt talked about. You know, a Ferris wheel on the river would probably be a great idea and everybody would love it, but it may not fit into the vision for Huron that we have decided. I'm gonna let you take the community input one, because to be honest, that one's very difficult for me.
Yeah.
I find it very difficult. Yeah, you talk to people, yeah, you read Facebook, you know, but I don't think we're unique. I don't know that we have found the magic bullet to get that kind of community buy-in. We'll hold community meetings, public hearings. We get, you know, if it's a controversial issue, 50 people to show up. You know, I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know if you do either, but it's a tough one.
Yeah, and I have some various thoughts. You know, going back to the vision plan, one of the things that I think was so important about it, and I forgot to mention in my opening remarks, is that part of the process of putting that plan in place was actually going back to the 2012 master plan that this community went through with the consultant city architecture, where there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people that touched that plan, which looked at initiatives citywide. And we went back and looked at that plan and said, you know, what's done, what's not done, what's half done, and also taking into consideration external and internal factors that may change what the initiatives were. So we felt going into the vision plan that, in essence, it already started off by being informed quite a bit by previous and past resident involvement. You know, during the process, we did everything we could to have work sessions, planning commission sessions, to try to get resident feedback throughout. And with that plan in place, and as we're putting into motion each piece of that plan, and I'll use the Main Street vision plan as sort of an example, because it comes from the bigger plan from the summer, but really this is an initiative in and of itself. And as council and the community will see, it is going to be very intensive to the best of our ability of engaging the public, and on various levels. So, you know, on one level, the staff's going to be very involved in getting information to the consultants. But at the same time, we also want a steering committee that really believes in the plan, that's driving the plan, which is really comprised of stakeholders on the corridor who are probably going to be most impacted by the plan. And then thirdly, we're going to have a series of community workshops in which, you know, we're going to invite the community, not just people who are on the corridor, but to weigh in on things such as amenities on the street, opportunities for public art, wayfinding along the corridor, addressing public parking, things that impact and affect visitors to the community and people that live in the community. So that's an example of taking a piece of the vision plan and us being very intentional to try to get as much input from different stakeholder groups throughout the community. One of the things we're even exploring is there an opportunity for a community survey as part of the process as well, to figure out what are the needs of the corridor, what do we vision this corridor being to make it more cohesive, what amenities are missing, what amenities do we want to support. And I will say that's probably an extreme example of engagement of the community. There's probably other parts of the plan that are a little bit more neighborhood specific. For example, if there's a new housing development going in somewhere, we're going to engage that community that surrounds that new housing development to make sure it fits in from a density standpoint, a walkability standpoint. But I think we're going to be really intentional to the best of our ability about engaging what we believe are the impacted folks and ultimately the beneficiaries of these projects.
What does the Vision 2020 plan look like 10 or 20 years in the future?
Yeah, two things occur to me, and I'm anxious to hear your thoughts on it. But first, it never occurred to me that this would increase population. Okay, now, to a minor extent because of the housing stock issue that Matt talked about a second ago, but not going from 7,000 to 15,000 or something like that. The other is many of the things in the plan, and I really encourage everyone to go out and take a look at it. It's out there on our Facebook page and our website and everything. To me, it was a lot of filling holes that exist right now. And by that I mean, to Matt's point, this was already ongoing. There was a lot of great work that was done prior to the relook at the plan. But you can see as you drive through town now, you can see the holes, right? That lot is empty now. Now that's better than an old abandoned factory, but that lot is empty. We've got some lots on Main Street that are empty, So to me, it's filling those gaps that exist right now, and then really supercharging the aesthetics. If you look at the plan, it just the town fits together, and it's much more aesthetically pleasing. So I'm not sure that it's so much a population growth play as it is making this town the one that we all that currently live here want, and how we want it to look, how we want it to be connected, and I would go so far as to say attract more people to visit so that we can get more business.
Yeah. And visions are tough because you both have to support the existing resident base and stakeholder base, but at the same time you need to be cognizant of and plan for the future generations and what do they want in their cities? What amenities are important to them? So it is a tough balancing act. And even just from a residential standpoint in terms of balancing, I think based on a process council went through last year as it relates to transient rentals, I think what was so great about that process is it's an acknowledgement of what this community is. I think we have to acknowledge we're on the water. It's a destination. People want a vacation here. Can we responsibly take advantage of that from an economic development standpoint while also protecting our neighborhoods? So I think we are understanding that this is a destination to those second home buyers, vacationers, and can we find a niche and benefit from that? But at the same time, we do envision this a place for long-term people to come here, raise their families here, and even after their families leave, maybe they move to a different type of housing unit, because we know, and we've had a lot of conversations with our school district, we need a strong city for a good school district, and we need a strong school district for a strong city. And one of the things we've been seeing is a slow out-migration really of sort of the younger population, which is most impactful to our school district. And we need to find ways, particularly from a residential standpoint, to create housing units or turnover housing units that bring in those new families. And really from an even broader vision besides just residential, one of the things that's so amazing about this city is, a lot of cities throughout Ohio, they're one thing. They're a bedroom community, or they're a small waterfront vacation community. And here, we've got strong corporate parks on the west end of town that really bolster our tax base. At the same time, we've got the ability for a really intimate, aesthetically pleasing downtown core that we see in some cities. And we've got really diverse housing stock options that exist, although we need to expand them. And we're seeing things like recreation being really important, and mobility and bicycling and those types of activities that we're starting to see existing populations and new populations want. So it is a grand vision. I don't think we're recreating the wheel by any means, but I think we've got to be really cognizant of what has made Huron strong from a tax base standpoint, and also look at initiatives that we think are going to be attractive to the next generation of individuals and families. And I think we're doing a really good job of balancing that. And I think we're fortunate to have all those types of businesses and developments in the city, and to Joel's point, making sure we integrate them really well, that really allows everyone to enjoy what's best of this city.
There is an aesthetic to downtown Huron. Let's call it modern New England fishing village. I don't know. So that we don't have a discombobulated mix of buildings that don't match the current characteristics, is there an aesthetic you envision or a theme that you have in mind for the current redevelopment?
I don't recall that specifically. Do you?
Yeah, I don't think we specifically touched on a real specific theme. But I think what was acknowledged in the plan is that there is a character of this city, both residentially, commercially, without defining what that is. But I think some things are obvious. There is sort of a smaller scale, particularly in the commercial corridor, and from a residential standpoint. There's nothing more than 2 or 3 stories to have this great sense of walkability and quaintness as a waterfront community. We do have things like design review standards that make sure that there's nothing ultra modern or ultra large from a scale standpoint that's going to feel out of whack. But it allows both a little bit of creativity if there's something new or being renovated, but at the same time is in place to make sure that there's nothing that's a major detriment to the aesthetic that exists. But without question, I do think it's important to on a high level, understand what has made this city so quaint and desirable for people and try to protect it without getting too specific that we really make it a place that seems really burdensome to do business or make improvements.
Yeah, and I guess in my mind, I don't think we talked about it, but you've got sort of the old school Huron stuff down here, like you said, on the north end that Joe and Monty have done to rehabilitate those places to look very much like they could be 50 years ago, right? And then in the middle where we had Urban Renewal, you've got sort of that 70s, early 70s architecture sort of thing. And then as you go further south, then you get back into the old school stuff with the Huron line plan and all that. My thought was that we wouldn't get rid of either, the old school or the new stuff, but that what we put in would flow with that. I don't know if that makes sense, but we're stuck with what we've got now. I think same here, because even the stuff in the middle has got sort of a nautical theme to it, the stuff by the boat basin.
Is there a plan for intermodal or multimodal execution? For example, introducing rail transportation between Toledo, Sandusky, Huron, and Cleveland?
No, haven't really talked about rail from a transportation standpoint. Obviously, in a previous life when I was in Sandusky, they were fortunate enough to have an Amtrak station, which, believe it or not, is actually becoming a much more popular mode of travel. It's becoming, again, a cool thing to do, and we're seeing investments in that station. So I do think there's opportunities for the region. Whether there's something actually in Huron specifically, I don't know. But take rail aside, one of the things we're really proud about is, the bike lanes on Route 6, which, that was as thorough of a public outreach process I've ever been a part of. And one of the things we're excited about when we do phase 2 of Route 6, which will basically go from Williams westward to the city limits, we'll be making the connection from the existing bike lane to the Lakeshore Electric Trail through Lake Erie Parkway. And ultimately, what's really exciting is we're in conversations with the Ohio Department of Transportation and some of our other jurisdictional partners. We actually have a work session at council on Tuesday about it, but we are working with those partners to actually install an 8-mile bike lane that will go from Rye Beach Road to the Cedar Point Sports Center complex. It'll be off-road, but a dedicated multimodal jogging and bicycle path. So then you'll be able to safely ride your bike jog from all through Sandusky and all through Huron. And our hope is ultimately, with our political partners, to extend that westward to Bayview and eastward to Vermilion. So we're excited to make those connections throughout the city.
How can the citizens of Huron get involved to help push the vision plan forward?
I'll take a shot at that first, because, I'm not a professional like Matt is and stuff. I just... I think a couple things. We need more engagement, right? We need more engagement from the community, and putting a post on Facebook is not engagement. Talk to your council people, come up and join in the city council meetings. We've got to have that. The second thing is, these things cost money, and the reality is, there are only so many levers that our town can pull when it comes to revenue, right? We've got the public utilities that Matt talked about. We've got our income tax. We've got the grants that he and his team are incredibly good at finding. But you got to realize, not everyone, many people have their pet project. There was a lot of talk about a rec center with a pool and an elderly support and a urgent care and things like that. We enjoy a very low tax rate in this town. If I recall correctly, there are only one or two communities in the state that are below 1%. The vast majority above. So, for the people that want these things, first of all, get your hands on that master plan, because I almost guarantee you the thing you want is in there. The list is extensive, okay? Second of all, realize what it's gonna take to get that, right? And then fight for it. We angst about a 2, 3, 4% increase in the water bill, when the reality is that if you break it all down and do the math, it comes to like $5 a month, okay? That's something that people can handle, right? I mean, so get involved, let us know what you want, push for what you want, but always remember, we gotta pay for it. It's gotta be paid for, and there are ways to do that, but help us leverage those ways,
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great point. Joel mentioned, this is a city that has had and deserves top-notch services, whether that's trash and recycling, whether that's the conditions of local roads, code and zoning enforcement, safety services, and the city forever has been able to manage that with a state minimum income tax and also very low real estate taxes. And then thirdly, to Joel's point, we do have the lowest cost of water within the region as well, if you look at other partners. So I've been impressed in my 17 months here to understand how we've maintained such a high level of service. And a lot goes to council leadership, but then also to really the people that are running these departments and working in the departments at the city who really work very nimbly from an economic standpoint and a staff manpower standpoint. It's just been truly tremendous. But there are a lot of things out of this plan that, for a city of this size may seem a little aggressive. Some of the improvements we want to make in our commercial corridors and along our waterfronts, and taking on a $25 million project at ConAgra that has significant public infrastructure needs. And, one of the things that I think we as a council and staff have committed, we are going to turn over every stone to figure out how to find creative ways to finance all or as much as possible of these projects. ConAgra has a probably $7 to $8 million public infrastructure cost to it, in which we've creatively found a way in which the new people who will be living there and investing there will in essence be paying for that infrastructure through some pretty creative financing. So we are trying to find ways to minimize the public's economic investment in some of these things that they want, and to also piggyback off Joel's prior comment, engagement is so important. And I'll say in a good way, when I came from Sandusky to Huron, the number of committees and boards and commissions that this city has compared to Sandusky, it dwarfs Sandusky in terms of the opportunities for resident engagement on almost any topic you can think of, from safety to utilities to recreation. There's a board and commission that are open to the public for almost every topic. So to be able to come to those, it is really important for us to hear that feedback. Because a lot of times there's things we're talking about, but we don't know if we're talking about everything that everyone is interested in. So I really encourage residents, at council meetings, at boards and commissions, directly reaching out to us via email or phone to express their concerns and desires. I think is critically important.
Yeah, and it's a good point. And I just want to spike what Matt said. We have incredible participation from the community. You've got John Blakeman, who's chomping at the bit for the tree canopy initiative, and you've got Chuck Norton, who never misses a finance. I mean, we've got really, really engaged citizens. We just need more.
Yeah.
Well, I'll ask the final question. Is there anything else you want to add?
I'll throw something out here. Again, I'm only 2 years in. I only have 2 years left on the council, but one of the things that's been really enlightening for me is the lack of integration or communication with our state representatives. And as Matt knows, and he's probably chuckling, it's really, really a bone of contention for me that we have representatives that represent a fairly small geography. You're talking 2 counties, right? Or for a senator, 3. Zero engagement. And I don't just mean they don't come to the meetings, whatever. They both purport to be residents of this town, yet we never hear from them. And when I reach out to them as a council member, not as a private citizen, I get very little in the way of feedback, right? So I think that, and I asked Matt about this very early on, is there no sort of place where we coordinate and get together and deconflict, right? They have their objectives, we have ours, and we've had 2 places now where we are conflicting. And Matt's like, no, not really. I think that's something that we should work on. Whether it's us working to pull and drag them into what we're doing or them voluntarily, because Matt said we used to have representatives that were very present and vocal in the community. I don't know the answer to it. It's just amazing to me that there's this lack of coordination from the municipal to the state level.
Yeah. And I'll just end with, I want to go to a point that was really pertinent with the vision plan, which was sort of the balancing of large-scale projects that are really going to help move the needle from an income standpoint and attraction standpoint to this community, and again, balanced against sort of basic services and things that have made Huron so great. We have seen, a lot of things that get published in the newspaper, those attention-grabbing type projects, ConAgra, RDAW, which is just a tremendous economic stimulator for this community, the eventual annexation of Sawmill Creek Resort into the city. Those are what grab headlines, and they are things that we invest our time in at the city. But what I want to stress as much as I can is the predominant activities that take up staff time, council considerations, how we spend our income tax is really on basic services. So I always want to remind people, even though they're reading the newspapers above the fold of these large projects, really behind the scenes, where a lot of and the most time and energy is being spent is on things like finding out ways to improve our local roads, looking for ways to make investments, both from a code enforcement standpoint in our neighborhoods and on our commercial corridors, to enhance small businesses and existing businesses, and finding out ways in which we can improve our public parks and public green spaces to the benefit of people that live here and visit here. So again, I just want to stress, there are a lot of big, exciting things that have been announced and that are on the horizon, and that's great. And we need that to keep the city sustainable and growing. But I just want to ensure residents, stakeholders, that what doesn't get published, because it's not the attention-grabbing headline, is really what takes up the majority of our time, energy, and economics, and we're going to continue to make those investments year after year because we realize the importance. Our consultant, OHM Advisors, is going to be giving a presentation on some of the public infrastructure improvements that are planned from Rye Beach Road all the way into the city of Sandusky, which gets into everything from newly installed roundabouts to help traffic flow, particularly that'll benefit Cedar Fair and alleviate those traffic jams and traffic backups that we see on Route 2. I talked about the 8-mile bike lane that's going to be going in between Rye Beach Road and the Cedar Point Sports Center. But what we realize, and why there's so much involvement from ODOT District 3, who represents this region, ODOT's state office, and even the feds, we looked at it just at the Rye Beach Road intersection. If you go down to Bogart Road to Cleveland Road West, there's $750 million in private investment, $750 million just right now on the books that's being made on Sawmill Parkway, here on Corporate Park, Moochie Farms, Sawmill Creek Resort, Lake Erie Parkway, and that has drawn the attention of the state, of the feds, to make some pretty cool and significant investments on that corridor, and we're hoping to even extend that southward and make some connections to BGSU Firelands all the way down to Moochie Farms from a bike and pedestrian standpoint as well. So it's really, really exciting, but we're hoping to, it's based on a plan that was done in 2019, but finally based on the level of investment, the amount of jurisdictional partners at the table. Cedar Fair buying Sawmill Creek Resort was huge. There's some big things that are set to happen, and I think we're going to re-unveil that 2019 plan at council on Tuesday.
Yeah, and then just so I leave on an up note, I want to pile on what Matt was saying about the stuff that happens in this town, and I had no idea until I got on council, the stuff that happens in this town that is simply incredible, the unsung heroes, what Jason Gibney does over at the water plant. This might sound stupid, but go spend a half hour with Jason at the water plant. It's absolutely fascinating. And this year he's almost doubling the capacity. And that's a real gem for Huron. We sell a lot of our water to other communities. The Huron Public Power, we're expanding Huron Public Power. There's some really cool stuff going on in this town that you wouldn't hear about because it's not fun to talk about, right? But it's very important, and there's some real unsung heroes on his staff that really deserve our appreciation. Yeah. All right, so I didn't leave it on up now.
Again, special thanks to City Manager of Huron, Matt Lasko, and Huron City Council Member Joel Hagy for their valuable time and knowledge, and the Huron Harbor House for allowing us to use their facility. For more podcasts and videos, go to lakeerie.tv. And if you have a story you'd like to see published, drop an email to us at lakeerietv@gmail.com. Thank you.